I want to thank Sinn Féin for using their private members' time to bring this motion. But Ceann Comhairle, over the last week, the housing crisis has come back front and centre on the political agenda. We've had much debate now about cuckoo funds, vulture funds and housing policy. Our Minister for Housing says he is committed to providing family homes, semi-detached or detached houses with front and back gardens, as he declared on the Claire Byrne show last week. The truth of the matter is, all this is rhetoric. Fine Gael want people to live in apartments or duplex-type units or terraced housing with no gardens. Ceann Comhairle, I don't think anybody would dispute in this House that our children and our children's children will aspire to living in semi-detached houses and homes with front and back gardens where they can rear their families in a reasonable space. This, to my mind, is most people's aspiration for themselves and their families. Unfortunately, the problem appears to be our own government does not realise that our planning policy, as enunciated in ministerial guidelines, provides for very little family homes, certainly not on the scale of 20,000 we hear politicians talk about in the national media. The most astonishing figure that struck me last week, that got no coverage in the media, was the statistic that out of 16,000 units that got planning from On Board Pleanála, only 4,334 were houses. And of those houses, only 1,200 were semi-detached or detached family homes. An astonishing figure for a government that are committed to building family homes. It is extraordinary that the penny hasn't dropped with either government or the media that we're not granting planning permission for family homes, that our planning policy prevents us from doing so. Last week it further became clear that the only reason the government got upset about cuckoo funds was because they started buying family homes. There are many issues surrounding the supply of housing, from planning policy to funding to viability. Apartments and duplex-type units are not viable outside of the M50. We have lots of SHD permissions that have not been implemented simply because there is no demand of many of the flats or duplexes that have granted permission for. One thing which seems to escape everybody in this House is that we will have to actually build family homes to solve the housing crisis. And most government policy is anti-family homes. For anyone who disagrees with me, I'd ask them to read SPPR 4 of the ministerial guidelines. It says, and I quote, "Avoid two-storey and own-door houses." If we are to have family homes, we must immediately start with amending our planning policy. We need to allow houses be developed at 10 houses per acre outside of the M50 to ensure that family homes can be built. We know for certain that this type of medium-density housing is what our constituents and their families want. It's what planners outside Dublin want. It is buildable, fundable and viable. Fine Gael in housing surrendered control of planning policy to a small cohort of planners who are city-based with the support of the Minister for Finance. They promoted a policy that forces families into small flats or duplexes or spaces that are not suitable for rearing families. This was confirmed by On Board Pleanála last week when they appeared before the Public Accounts Committee. A mere 7% of the total units granted were family homes. Has no one in government stopped to consider this point? Our planning system is abjectly anti-family homes, in favour of this high-density model which was conceived in post-revolution Moscow, the 15-minute city regularly cited by the Custom House as the panacea to all housing and transport ills, has never worked anywhere from a social perspective. This policy does not consider its dire social effects. I commend the county councillors of Cavan who exercised their mandate and rejected this Stalinist anti-family home policy in favour of a rational approach that will serve their constituents well. I call on all councillors in rural Ireland worth their salt, stand up and be counted and reject this Stalinist housing policy which has been slavishly implemented by Fine Gael government. If we do not in the first instance give people the family homes they want, we will never resolve the housing crisis. The real question is, does Fianna Fáil have the bottle to take control of this crisis? To do so, they must amend the planning policy now. If they don't do it, then for the next few months, this crisis will persist for decades. Thank you.